Hey everyone, welcome back to Peak Human. I'm Brian Sanders, the maker of the Food Lies series, which we are pitching around right now to the big streaming platforms. We got episode 1 done. It's so good. People are loving it. This episode today is with Drako. This is part 2. You got to go back and listen to part 1 where we set everything up. This is the conclusion. We're talking about all the things and why you can't cheat nature. This is a big thesis that we've been putting together for years now. I think everyone's going to really like this one because it goes beyond just the ancestral diet or just one way of eating. It explains everything that goes on in our modern society and why we've gone astray, why things are the way they are, and how to fix them, most importantly. And part of fixing that is the Sapien movement. This is the community organization we're creating, that we're getting people around the world in on this with us to join together, shared resources, do something for common good of us all, projects we believe in. We talk about one of the projects in this episode, but there will be much more, and we're going to do this together. So go to sapien.org. You can join the waiting list there. Also go to nosetotale.org if you want to get some of our great products. We have the body care stuff made from beef tallow. We got the biltong. We still got some pork left. Check that out, nosetotale.org. Support us there. Support our ranchers. And enjoy this episode. We go deep into many topics that bring everything together into one thesis. So this is going to be a good one. Put in your email at sapien.org and enjoy this one with Drako. All right, we're back with Drako. This is a two-parter. If you didn't listen to the first one, go back to episode 1. You got to hear both of these. And Drako left off telling us about his amazing health journey and recovering from 6 different conditions and is completely fine now. And we also talked about the 180 city tour that you went on. So I want to catch back up there about what you learned because you went to way more places than I did.
So once I resolved these health issues, I went quite deeply to find out what was it that caused my issues. I guess it was a combination between the Western A price kind of concept where we went to see tribal communities and so on. And then we also went to see some of the blue zones as well. I did a video called Debunking the Blue Zone Myths. We went to Ikaria and found out that pretty much they just eat meat all day.
Yeah, Ikaria is this island in Greece. And they call it a blue zone. Dan Buettner basically just went there with his idea that all these populations were vegetarian and that's why they lived so long, when really it was all the other lifestyle factors they did. And Ikaria, well, tell us more about it. Yeah.
I can tell you what we learned there. The Ikaria is one of the more insightful ones because, number one, I speak the language because I can speak Greek. And so we could actually communicate with everyone like locally to see what they really thought. And number 2 is that we went in the summer. And this is when there's no Lent, there's no fasting, because the Greeks do fast for 40 days. Actually, they fast for a couple of weeks in August and for what's the equivalent of Lent as well. It's part of the Orthodox calendar. And this was actually a priest that put this together. I think his name was Chrysostom. I have to look that up. Byzantine guy. And he actually did it for health. He said, okay, it's a good idea to do this. He found that if you do this fasting, it was healthy. So they put it into the religion. It wasn't the other way around, right? It was actually because of health. They put it into the religion. And it's a real cultural artifact that's across the whole of the country. But if you go in the summer, these people, the Icarians, are very particular about 2 things. Number 1, they eat everything seasonally. They don't believe in the mainland. They don't believe in the foodstuffs that come from the mainland, which is kind of...
They don't trust them.
They don't trust them because they know.
It's like Clemens, the Maasai guy. He doesn't trust the foods that sit on the shelf.
It's very similar. They know that it's not natural or something that's unconnected to nature is happening in the mainland or the big cities. They have to have these commercial food production. So they eat seasonal. They have their gardens. They have their animals. They produce like cheese and preserves and things like that. But yes, it was very, very animal-based. And the other thing that we noticed when we talked to them is they love animal-based stuff. They love the meat, and they particularly love like offal and organs and all these other things that we don't really eat anymore in the Western world. So yeah, Ikaria was really good.
They're eating like lamb and goat.
Oh, lamb, goat, pigs, you name it.
It's not like they have lots of cows just lying around. It's an island.
Very goat and sheep type oriented stuff. A lot of pigs as well.
And they're eating nose to tail. And this is another thing that I've learned about the blue zones is if you're just a random author, I don't even know who Dan Buettner is and what his credentials are. Not that I have any, other than being an engineer. But he just goes there. He's not a food scientist, so he just sees them eating whatever they eat. He doesn't know that they're cooking in animal fat, and that's a huge source of calories. I mean, that's just one small piece of it. That you look at a plate and like, oh, there's some vegetables. Well, there's
5 times the calories of animal fat that the vegetables are cooked in than the vegetable itself.
That's true. I'll tell you what else we saw. We were introduced to a chap there who took us through studies that were done with Athens University. And what they found was that when they're recording the meat, they would actually bundle various kinds of meats together. So like when they said meat in kraus in Greek, it means beef. And so they said, oh no, we don't eat meat here. We only eat lamb. I mean, that's the thing.
Exactly.
So I actually saw that on the paper and I was like, okay, that's interesting to note. So difficult when you don't have some of the cultural context. Like when we went to Japan, I noticed there as well that the Japanese do enjoy eating all sorts of interesting things that we don't have on a day-to-day basis.
All kinds of weird
tribes and seafood and all. Yeah, it's hard also to escape the cultural context. It's hard also to get away from the fact that these people have, especially in what Buettner's Blue Zones in particular were striking, was that the communities were very tight. Right? They had a real sense of identity. Ikaria doesn't really identify itself almost as a Greek island. They're like just on their own. The Cretans are the same as well. They identify themselves as Cretans. They're not really Greeks like the mainland. We are Cretans, and their Koreans are the same. So they have a very tight sense of identity. And I think that was one thing that really helps with I'm not sure if it's stress or mindset or something, but it definitely leads to this kind of like a thriving setup.
Community. It's community and its sense of purpose. And so the Blue Zones, for me, they do 30 great things, and one of them being eating whole foods. And a subcategory of that is Dan thinks that they eat mainly plant-based, which may not even be a big factor, because if you're doing all these other things correct and you're eating whole foods and you have the sense of purpose and you have the community and you're outside and you're moving, this is what the main reason why I think people live so long. And it's not because they didn't eat meat, because they did eat meat, but it's like, of course, well, they're eating whole foods. Even if they were eating smaller amounts of meat, because that's all they had. And in Okinawa, this was after World War II. And when this population were raised that became the centenarians, they didn't have anything else but sweet potatoes.
Oh yeah, no, there's also constraints. Sometimes people do have to eat the survival foods, or that is what you're around you for a while, right? But in general, yeah, I think that the Blue Zones, the positioning of the Blue Zones is not correct. It's also handpicked certain areas. Like I've not been to Hong Kong, but apparently Hong Kong have some of the longest lifespan in the world, health span in the world. But people from Hong Kong, they eat the most meat, I think, almost in the world.
Yeah.
And also they walk the most. Yeah. So there's correlations there that really need to be picked up again. I think I would like us to do this once we get our Sapien movement going. These are the kinds of projects that we're interested in. What are really the zones where people were thriving? Well, we have a few which are candidates. Obviously, the Maasai in Kenya and Tanzania, those guys were unbelievably healthy. These 7 foot tall, absolute beasts, and they just eat blood, milk, and meat all day. A lot of movement, a lot of outdoors. But as far as like calm, charismatic, powerful warriors with a strong identity, it was amazing, wasn't it, to watch them?
Oh, and yeah, I want to do the red zones.
Oh yeah,
one day that's my goal in life, is to go do the red zones and show the people that have the longest health span are these people. And Frederick, the Sami reindeer herder, people remember that episode. That was one of the early episodes of Peak Human. And this guy was up in the Arctic, and he told the story of his father, I think it was, who was in his 90s, that took some kind of like 20-mile day trip just to visit his friend and walk 20 miles home. It was something crazy. And then died 2 weeks later at 97. I should re-listen to that episode. I mean, these people are just out there eating reindeer and fish, and that's like the bulk of their diet. And then they eat kind of these moss, and it's not like they're carnivore or anything, but they're eating these animal-based foods, living a long, healthy life, and then dropping dead.
Through the tour, through this huge tour that we did, there were some really obvious things that now make sense to us, right? Having looked at them. One is that nutrient density is important. Source of food is important. Natural sources of food were critical, and whole sources of food. Seasonal things seem to be important. Ferments were a part of a lot of cultures that had a lot of human thriving.
Was this whole food? So really what it is coupled to nature. Actually, this is going back to the thesis, is that the Blue Zones, all the people are coupled to nature. Every person who's ever lived a long and healthy life, pretty much, has been coupled to nature. Even the ones in the modern day. You hear the stories of the woman at 115 and like, what's the secret? She's like, I eat eggs and bacon every day for breakfast. These are the people that grew up coupled to nature. They grew up on the farm. They grew up eating real foods. And that's what the blue zones are. They are coupled to nature. That's the essence of it. You cannot say that it was because they're plant-based.
Nutrition is one part of it, right? I think the other part of the coupling that we decouple a lot from is when we live in these big cities. And it used to be that if you had a tribe that was around the 150 mark, I think there's this magic number.
Dumbbell's number, yeah, 150.
It would bifurcate. It would split into two, and then one tribe would go over here and one tribe would go over there. Well, this for millennia was how human tribes would basically establish and move around and populate different areas. But then you have like these cities that have got millions of people, like extremely depersonalized, where you have your cliques and so on, but you're just in a situation which is really just unprecedented in human history, especially over the last 100 years or so, where we have now this emergence of these mega cities with extremely high population densities. And then you just have the social element and this social stress that comes in and causes issues. Obviously, if you're in a situation where your identity is really clear, you have a sense of purpose, you are known, you are seen. I think this is another concept that we really think is a big part of it. When you have an identity and you feel that you are seen by others within your community, it gives you this sense of confidence and pride. It somehow affects your physiological health.
To be seen, I think that's the ultimate, what is the purpose of life, or what is the ultimate thing that we all want? And some people think it's money and power, but I say it's to be seen. That is the ultimate human desire, which kind of is what money and power is for, right? If it's the root of all things, is to be seen.
I think that the money power thing is the false version of it. If you think that's a proxy for being seen, that you'll buy your way into it, or you become big and powerful and you validate yourself externally. But when you're seen for who you are by people that you respect and they appreciate your identity, I think there's something very powerful in that. And it lets you establish your mindset in the right way that leads to a long health span. I think it's something like this. Longevity is not just the amount of years that you're alive. There's this kind of idea also of a false longevity. I want to discuss this a bit. So if you were like, let's say in hospital from the age of 55 to 120, and then you're still alive, you're going to have television crews coming. You're going to have people asking you, what did you do to stay alive for so many years? But you wouldn't have really much of a lived life if you were in bed that whole time, or you were in a constrained environment because you were just kind of preserving yourself. It probably wouldn't feel like it's a very long life either, even though you had that life in years. Because I think that especially where you have like a sense of purpose and identity and appreciation for the things that are happening around you, as your family, I think what happens is that you kind of clock in your experiences. And especially if you have that gratitude and appreciation, life appears very long. So you might not live long in years, but because really the sense of time, there's many different versions of it. One sense of time is like you could say, well, it's the clock, okay? That's what I've got, how many years I was alive. The other sense of time is how many things I did within my life, within the envelope of what's my life. And so this idea that I must stretch the time by doing all these weird things with my biological markers, and maybe I just stay indoors and I stay safe. Actually, what you're doing is you're taking away that life experience. It's like a hollow longevity with the time. And true longevity is having experiences, acknowledging them, having gratitude for them. It feels like every day is different. It feels like you've had a long-lived life. Imagine if you're in a job that it's the same thing over and over again, you don't really enjoy it. All days roll into one and your life's going to feel very short.
Yeah. No, it's the quality of your experience. It's like how many good experiences do you have? And if you could live in a hospital bed and it could be terrible, but you live a long time. It's meaningless.
Yeah, I think also like you can also be a rock star and just like tons of different experiences, but you don't appreciate them or notice them. And also life will go like a blaze. So what we notice with people that are in these places that in particular enjoyed their lives, and I met restaurateurs, I met like goat herds, we met like leaders of the village, we met all sorts of people from these places. And especially in terms of the ones that like older, more like statesmen and stateswomen, you could sense that they appreciated the moment with you, like with me, right? I really could see it. They were present. And you were like, well, I actually was thinking like that's kind of what I want in life. I want to be able to know, when I'm in front of somebody, I'm giving them my presence, I'm appreciating the moment and really like engaging with them. And that I think is the secret to actual longevity, whole longevity, rather than the hollow longevity of just like how many years and what did your biomarkers look like.
Yeah, no, this is so good. So it's the whole verse hollow, and it's the coupled to nature. Like, I think it always goes back to that. So I was just thinking about all these different things, like biohackers trying to do different techniques to like try to look at something like very myopic. Like they'll go over one health marker, or like the telomere length. I'm like, well, is this really going to help you? I mean, maybe it does. And I think a lot of biohacking is actually just coupling to nature. So it's like any good biohack is actually just trying to replicate what nature is doing for you, or how we used to live.
So I would like to see what the biomarkers look like for some of these people. One of the things we did is Clements, the Maasai, the chief, the elder, we measured his blood sugar. His fasting blood sugar was 67, and he was hiking all day with us that day. Yeah. And so I wonder, if you look at these people who are not worried about telomere lengths, they're just like living that coupled life. I reckon that they will have biomarkers that exceed anybody. But we have to go and test that one out, right?
Well, yeah. I can just tell that these are the people that live. Well, we see him. He was running up hills. I don't know how old he was, but he was running up hills. He was an older gentleman. And that's why I don't believe in all of the gadgets and gizmos. Maybe you can try them out for a second and get to know, okay, this is what happens when I eat processed food and my blood sugar goes up. But you don't need to live your life by it.
Yeah, I think it's what you want to be in reaction to. So I think there's a concept of, in life, if you can be sort of at the cause of running your life rather than be in the reaction of things. It's almost like a concept of being in victim mentality. You can be in victim mentality to your biomarkers. You can be panicking when some biomarker shifts and trying to wrangle that back into shape. But you're not just going out and living your life. There's something to be said for this, because if we talk biomarkers with some of these guys who are like out there actually living a life, it's like not just the blue zones, but in the communities that we saw that were really thriving, I think they just don't care. It's not like where the quality of life is for them, right? But if you are in reaction to biomarkers, you see your blood sugar spike a little bit one day and you have some problems, your B12 is down, your testosterone is down a little bit one day, and then you're just always kind of scrambling to try and figure out, oh no, I have to get my markers up again. And I can't see how that leads to a good life. One thing we've been looking at is supplementation of some of these natural things. Like there's this huge drive for TRT around these days, right? And you have Joe Rogan and so on who are big proponents of this whole thing. But this is a real decoupling from nature, because you're taking some exogenous hormones and you're putting them into your body. And then your own body has got regulatory systems that are supposed to be able to adjust this. But if you're just short-circuiting everything and popping it in there, your body's compensatory systems are going to go all over the place. And they do. And this happens with all sorts of these kinds of interferences when we go in there and we try and change something that we think is like a dial in our body.
Melatonin is a good one.
The pill, right? That's a real wrench in the gears. People are told, oh, use it to regulate your period or anything like this. I know it's probably a little controversial, but it's really important to think about what are the other impacts of really putting a wrench in the gears of your body, which is this very sensitive system. It regulates these things in accordance with its evolutionary design.
Well, you can't cheat nature. This is it.
Exactly.
You can't go back. So even the melatonin, it's a good hack. I mean, and people can use it, and maybe you use it if you're traveling and you're jet lagged and you can use it once a couple times a year, that's fine. But if you're using it every night and it seems to be working, but what is the repercussions of that?
Yeah, I guess you are like, what bank account are you drawing from? Because nothing comes for free.
So you're down-regulating your ability to produce it yourself.
Well, you're actually down-regulating your ability to regulate it, because you're taking it outside of your regulatory envelope. So your body's not able to stop you. I mean, as you stick yourself with a needle and inject yourself with a hormone, how is your body going to control that other than stopping you doing that, right? So it's only got its internal systems. So we see like the growth of breast tissue. You see you get fat deposits in unusual places above the hips. You can see your testes and your own production of testosterone going down, like all sorts of things happen. You get dysregulation. That's for something like, say, TRT. So keeping coupled to nature is very important. And if you're wanting to, say, adjust something, like if you're worried, let's say, of a biomarker, maybe you do have naturally low testosterone because you're living a certain way and you have caused yourself some chronic issues. The answer is not to just go and stick yourself with hormones chronically.
Well, you have to do it naturally. Yeah. So you have low testosterone for a reason. You're not lifting weights. You're eating the wrong foods. You're sitting inside all day. You're not challenging your body.
Sedentary life. Yeah.
You're not having the right social interactions even. So maybe there's all these different causes. So instead of putting the duct tape over the warning light and just masking it, you need to go change your lifestyle. Your body's trying to tell you something by these.
This is what we're doing with the Sapien movement, right? What is the way to do these things naturally? And so we like to encourage people that the best way forward couples you with nature. And then, of course, there's the insight. We've got a lot of this insight that we're going to share, but it's like, what is effective? And a lot of it is actually quite obvious. A lot of these things. You're talking about social interactions, about exercising your strength, about movement, about the right kind of nutrition. It's kind of like obvious. But the thing is, the principle can be obvious. Some of the details are important, but the practice can be difficult. Yeah. Like it's hard to start lifting. It's hard to pull yourself off the couch. It's hard sometimes to make certain social interactions happen. It's hard to resolve issues in your life that maybe have put you in a certain position of stress or what have you. These are hard that you should do them. But then the principle is easy. The practice is hard. It takes courage.
Yeah. And that's why we're just getting people together to do it together. It's not like we have some program where we're going to tell you the answer. It's that we're building a community where we're finding the answer together. And I was just thinking about the biohacking thing. I don't want to just dismiss biohacking, but I was just saying that good biohacking is just getting yourself more back in tune with nature. So you can wear blue blocking glasses. You can get the Flux app on your computer to make the red light block the blue light and only have the red light, right? But I'm saying is what that's doing is just bringing you more into accordance with nature,
with natural principles. Yeah. It's finding the natural principle, and I think it's not hard. I think the other thing is it's not the hardest thing to find the natural principle. We don't have to look very far back in history if you want to do those things, and this is some of the wisdom, the ancestral wisdom that we can bring to the present to help us get out of some of these quagmires that we're in.
So you were talking about in the blues traveling around that people would eat seasonally. And then you were talking about your health problems and eating tomatoes and all these different things. You got rid of them. So I just wanted to talk about the gut irritants, plant chemistry, all this stuff, because we kind of never got into that.
Yeah, a long while. It was like maybe 3 years. I was looking into what the hell was it that caused me to have my issues from eating these things. And so, yeah, in particular, I studied the tomato a lot. That's a very interesting vegetable. You see, what I discovered about the tomato is nothing is in isolation. All like plants and everything, every bacteria, fungi, every plant, mycorrhiza, everything that you can imagine that's alive, mammals, they all have an intimate connection with the ecosystem. And this can include things that eat them. So it doesn't have a will, right? Tomato doesn't want anything to happen to it or not. It's just that the way its evolutionary design works is that, look, it's not going to be able to survive if something eats it when its seeds are not mature. So what the tomato does, and let's say there's a population of baboons that eats these tomatoes, let's say, for example, what's going to happen is that the tomato produces these vigor-altering chemicals. And these vigor-altering chemicals have different effects for different reasons. Tomato lectin is there, especially with immature tomatoes, to alter the vigor of any animal that starts to eat them. Because the tomato, if it gets eaten by an animal when the seeds are not mature, obviously those seeds won't get dispersed properly. They have to be eaten at the right time and then to be dispersed. And they have to be eaten at the right time by an animal that will disperse them in the right way. Now, the way that it works is that a baboon is born with some genetic propensity to want to eat a tomato when it's unripe. Well, tomato is effectively, over time, starts to poison this particular animal, and it will lower its vigor, and therefore this animal doesn't become the alpha. I'm simplifying it a little bit. And then it doesn't reproduce, and therefore the genes that caused that baboon to eat that tomato are not spread throughout that community, and both the tomato and the baboon's community survives. So this is just a very rough example of how I was looking at it. And another one is if one of the baboons is eating too many tomatoes. And so even when the tomato is ripe, there's substances in that tomato to stop the baboon from overeating it. And so the two substances that I looked at was, tomato lectins and saponins. So you have these glycoalkaloid poisons, which fat accumulate, and they're in more of the ripe tomato. They're a steroidal structured molecules. It looks a bit like cholesterol with something hanging off the top. And these things are membrane disruptors. So when they go into your gut, they are able to disrupt the membrane of the epithelium. The tomato is growing a poison that affects the population of animals. However it got there, who knows? It's a secondary metabolite, but it's not there for the tomato to do something in its own metabolism. It's there specifically to form that relationship between the animal population that eats it, and it's there specifically to alter the vigor of an animal in order to tune the populations that eat the tomato. We have this kind of connectivity between the plants and the animal kingdom. And I mean, it makes sense when you think about it that they would have some sort of defense against an animal eating an immature seed, or against a population of animals overeating it or decimating other populations that are supposed to eat it so that it's better spread. It's so difficult to do experiments with because they would run over like very large time periods, possibly several, like could be lifetimes, where slowly a genetic predisposition is taken out of a population in order for both populations, both the tomato, let's say, or that plant to survive, and for the community to survive. So that was just one example. Now, one thing with tomatoes, I want to just give them a little bit of stick here because they're a cash crop. They grow almost everywhere. Huge volumes of these things are grown. They can be grown and stored immature for months, and then they can be ripened with ethylene gas. They have an umami flavor, which is pleasant for us. So it's a massive commercial crop. So it's a food of commerce. And a food of commerce, as we discussed in the last podcast, not necessarily the food of health. In particular, for humans, tomatoes are quite a new food that got introduced to humans. They come from South America. Only very recently, we don't grow them nor eat them in the same way that they were traditionally eaten. For me, I noticed that I had some sensitivities to them. When I ate a lot of tomatoes, I'm in Greece. We think that Greek salad should have tomatoes, and almost all the food has got some form of tomatoes in it. So this poison that's in a tomato, it's called saponin. And what happens is that's how this glycoalkaloid poison works. It's trying to regulate the amount of tomatoes that you're eating. And so an amount remains in your body. And when it gets past a certain point, you get these autoimmune effects typically. So that's what I experienced myself and discovered, okay, that was it for me. And a lot of people have these sensitivities. The other thing is the entire nightshade family tends to have some kind of poison regulatory system. And you can look at this is part of the sapient principle. You can look at like other types of vegetables and fruits that we try and eat, and you can kind of determine through their defense mechanisms whether they're going to be safe to eat. For example, blackberries have got thorns, right? But they're not really poisonous to us. There's no real chemicals in them that will do us damage. An onion has got lacrimation chemicals in there. If you bite an onion while you're chewing the ground at your cow or something, it makes you have tears. It's uncomfortable. So that's how its defense mechanism works. It doesn't have to poison the organism to make it move away from it. So these principles here, broadly speaking, I started to look at a few of these different examples, and we have a principle that we can apply in a broader context as to how you should eat. What are the principles by which you can stick to determining a diet that you can eat and remain healthy? And you don't really want to be eating plants that have vigor altering chemicals in them. Let me tell you that. It may be sick. You want to keep your vigor. It's a very good idea. And there's no need to eat those either. I mean, we eat things like, okay, I'll give you another example very few people know about, but red kidney beans are actually extremely toxic when they're raw. Like when they've just come off the tree and they're even desiccated, right? They're extremely toxic. They have a poison called hemagglutinin in them, and it's a lectin that causes your blood to clot. And if you have a handful of these, it make you extremely sick. In fact, the red kidney beans have to be steam treated before they're sold as a commodity because that hemagglutinin is heat sensitive and it can be diminished to the point where these are not toxic for us. But I mean, my question is, why would you eat these damn things in the first place, right?
Well, yeah, this is just bringing up, this is kind of in the carnivore world. People get really obsessed with this, but there is something to it, and it's about eating seasonally. It's about just thinking more thoughtfully about the way that you're eating these different plant foods. It's not that plant foods are bad. It's just which ones are we going to eat and when are we going to eat them?
The plants that we're talking about here that we consume, there's special little beasties and animals and who knows what that evolved and were designed to eat these things. And some of them are not for humans. Some of these cultivars that we have made of these vegetables, one is a good example is the broccoli. It all come from the mustard plant. And we have like kohlrabi, cauliflower, broccoli, kale, all these things, it all comes out of the same mustard plant that we've bred as a cultivar. And we've maybe even bred out some of the poisons that were there. We've diminished them a little bit. So it's not to say that it's all bad. We are able to like basically cultivate these particular plants so that we can eat them. But my question is like, why would you if it's going to be altering your vigor, if it's going to be accumulating toxins, if it's going to be ruining your guts? It's better to just avoid these things in the first place.
Yeah, just eat them moderately or just be more thoughtful about what you eat. I mean, people eat like fruits, some of these tubers, some of these things are just a little more benign.
Yeah, I think the fruits in particular seem to be much more benign. Although, if you really want to be annoying, fruit cultivars that are sold in your supermarkets and everywhere these days, they have been cultivated for very high sugar content. And so I've had a real apple. I've had they come from out of Kazakhstan, these things, and they're very mealy and sour. Not one of these red delicious things that is just dripping with sugar. They've got a lot lower sugar content. Also, I had a Zimbabwean pineapple, same thing, like tiny little thing. It's a tart fruit and you recognize it's got a lot less sugar in it. Nowadays, we have these cultivars that we demand them. They have a higher sugar content. It's more palatable. And so, that's become the food of commerce, is overly sweet fruit. So you want to be careful not to overeat some of these things. If people say, all fruit is good, I'm going to go and get in the supermarket and get fruit. But this is it's a painful truth, but there's not carte blanche to just go and eat whatever you want and you'll be fine. These days, you have to be very intentional and you have to understand the principle.
Yeah. Well, it's just the principle of nature, and nature's ratio is really important. And well, here's another interesting one that we talk about sometimes is the cortisol thing. It's like cortisol gets a kind of a bad rap, but it really can be an effective use of your body's hormones.
Yeah. So, okay, going into this side of things, all of these things that your body, like all the signals that your body gives, all the hormones that are in your body, all this very complex and incredible system, it's all a part of nature. So that's the wonderful thing. Whatever's in your body, it's there for a reason. So it's weird how we demonize things like cholesterol is one thing that everyone demonizes, or even like maybe fat. But cortisol is one that's in the public consciousness now because people say, you're spiking your cortisol. You're stressed out. It's a terrible thing, but it exists for a reason. So cortisol exists because it's a sort of an energy valve when there's a need to address an external threat of some sort. Let's say, and it's not a quick threat. So for quick threats, we have adrenaline. It's if a lion appears in front of you, is about to eat you, you have a hormone that also does the same thing, but in a very, very short period of time. It allows you to quickly get energy into your legs. You become hyper aware. Your peripheral vision sharpens, and you run much faster than you would without it. And so that's for the short term. And then you have the longer term stress hormone, which is your cortisol. So if let's say a tribe comes and sets up camp next to yours and starts to encroach on your resources, well, if you're a member of the tribe that is subject to this new neighbor, you are going to have your cortisol go up because that tribe is an external threat that needs to be dealt with, and your body's energy needs to go and be reassigned to go and deal with that threat. And so that's all that cortisol is. The trouble is that these days, especially within modern living and in modern society, we've got to a state where people have got consistent amounts of high cortisol because they're dealing with financial stress, they're dealing with relationship stress, they're dealing with all sorts of situational stress. And that it's not that the cortisol helps them in that situation. It's just that when they're in a state of stress, it goes up. And it's the body saying, okay, go and deal with all these stressors. And when you're finished, the levels will go down again. However, they never do. And the other problem with cortisol is that it suppresses your immune system, your body's rest and repair mechanisms, your peristalsis, your gut, all sorts of things get shut down that require energy when cortisol is high.
Well, that makes perfect sense because you don't need to digest food if you're dealing with a tribe or a war.
Yeah, you don't need to digest food. Hell, you can even just suppress your immune system. Takes a lot of energy of your body, your repair mechanisms as well. I mean, you found if you got high cortisol, your wound healing time increases. So if you have high cortisol of this period of years, obviously you're going to start kind of falling to pieces. And we see that, right? And this is not just a little bit of rest and repair. We're talking your nervous system as well. You're talking all sorts of systems that start to become more dysfunctional. And that's that chronic issue with society being constructed in such a way that there's just no respite. And there is impact to that, which is maybe also, I believe it's very much responsible for the chronic inflammation, for cancers, for a lot of autoimmune diseases, because your body just has reallocated energy and it's going to the outside world to deal with.
So your body's smart in a way, but it wasn't designed to do this chronically. That's why I've been talking about the acute versus chronic for a long time. It's like it kind of explains what goes on in society and why we're so messed up, because everything is now chronic when it used to be an acute thing. And we can get this cortisol spike and it could help us, right? It actually helped our body. It helped us deal with the situation at hand and smartly shut down some other systems. But now we have it chronically and we're screwed. So this acute versus chronic is a huge one.
In fact, the acute is good for you. We call it
hormetic stress.
Hormetic stress, exactly. So with acute things, you can get your body to be able to extend the range of things that it can handle. Like cold plunge is an acute hormetic stress, or even sometimes the sauna, or perhaps like extremely intense exercise, you're sprinting, things like this. These things, they actually help to build your body and your body's capability. For some reason, it just seems that with the chronic, for some reason, is really around the cortisol, that long-term chronic leads to these conditions, which really the longer that you are in that state, the more difficult it is to come out of those chronic conditions.
This stuff is amazing. And then so what's the answer is going back to nature, coupling again to nature. And how are we doing this?
We have to be quite intentional about it, right? We know that there's certain things that we can cheat nature with for a little bit, or we have some leverage. For example, a bicycle is somewhat taking nature and giving a little hand, right? Or an airplane, even if you really want to go into that. But it's not as integrative and involved with your body as something like the food that we're eating, the ratios that we expect of that food, the structure of that food, profiles of the fatty acids and proteins and so on within that food, the nutrients. These things are like, these ratios are actually almost as important as the nutrients themselves. Because if you get them, as we discussed in the last podcast, if you get them in the wrong ratio, if it come with too much energy, then you're going to end up with energy toxicity. You may even still end up starving yourself of certain nutrients if you're just focused on that being your core food that you will eat, particularly the highly processed foods. So yeah, you can't cheat nature. It's like humans have gotten quite, we'll say the word is arrogant, but we've gotten a little bit of hubris given our skills development within material science. So we're very good at doing all sorts of interesting things these days with the world around us. But the body and its interaction with the natural environment is just, people think that it's a number of factors, it's a few things that we can measure, but it's well beyond us being able to control for it. Anytime that we interfere with what our body needs, over the long term, certain things are going to cause us serious issues that can be very hard to resolve. And so where is human thriving? Where do we believe that comes from? This is with the movement that we're establishing. It comes from recoupling to nature. And what does that mean? There's a number of different things, but at least it means like interfering less with the sorts of things that we eat, our sources of food, understanding that if you are going to live stressed out in a certain way, or you are pushing yourself over the long term, whether it's through eating the wrong kinds of foods or even things like just maintaining a sedentary lifestyle, not moving enough, not getting enough sunlight. There's no question you're going to have problems in later life. Some people are less resilient than others. That's the genetic predispositions. But by and large, everyone is going to have issues if they have their body pushed out of nature for a long time. The warning lights are going to come on, and then we're going to go to the doctor to help to put duct tape over those warning lights, because that's how the modern healthcare system works as well, right? So how do we resolve that? That's
what I've been thinking about for 10 years now. And so the best thing we've come up with is this concept of the sapient movement and this concept of a community organization. So I guess we should just spill the beans on it a little bit, that we are trying to build something that helps get the community together, right? We have all these people that are doing what we're talking about, and no one's been able to just put it together into this package yet, right? There's different people on their path, and a lot of them are friends of mine, different influencers out there, and they're doing an amazing job, and they're talking about this one thing, and these people are talking about this one thing. Or what I think we need to do is get all these people together, and everyday folks as well, to do that parallel society. This is what I mentioned in the last podcast, is that we don't need to tear down the system. You said to take it back. We don't need to have anarchy and go against the government. We can live within society, but have our own better version where we are more coupled to nature. We live in a better way. This is why I moved to Austin, to be around more people that believe in what I believe in. And now, instead of I'm in LA and I'm in my little box, and maybe I can go socialize, and I go to my little box and I go to my little apartment, or I get to see people once a week, twice a week. How can we live like we used to? How do we have community on a daily basis? This is how the blue zones work. This is why they live so long, is they're around their family. They're having multi-generational households. So it's like, what can we do to have a parallel society where we're not out in the woods? Maybe some people will go out and live on their own land.
I think
some people will.
There's a few people. I mean, like it's a great idea, but cities do provide a lot of wonderful things, and there's many benefits to the modern world, right? There's many. It's just that we've got to separate a bit of the wheat from the chaff, because it's all come so quickly. So the community organizations, I think it's critical to build that community that we're building, because a rising tide lifts all boats. As soon as you have a lot of people who are all kind of aligned and focusing in that direction, insights come. Just like when we set up the Sapien Center here, we've got like our members at least are more aligned towards finding that way of human thriving and doing it in a non-ideology way, right? In a ways where we talked about like camp, no camp. It's not like a carnivore, a keto, a pro-metabolic. It's not a Zen Buddhist. It's just, let's find what is the closer truth together. And if we have people who've got that mindset and we build a living body of knowledge around it with a community that is really pushing to achieve that, we'll get there.
Yeah. So this is what's already happened. So I took a look at the Sapien Center and why are people here, and people asking what it is. And in the beginning, it was people who eat animal-based diets or eat sapien diets. But then that's not what it is at all. That was just a small part of it. It's really people who reject the modern norms, right? It's the people that think a little more thoughtfully about nature and living closer to it and what humans are meant to do and how to live. And so, but we need to do that on a bigger scale. We can't just do it here. And so the idea is to combine resources and do projects together. Even what's happened around Sapien Center is people start companies together. We start hiring people out of Sapien Center into Sapien, come into Nose to Tail, come into the projects we're working on. So this is the dream of mine, is how can we let people escape the matrix? How do we get people to live their dream? And no one wants to be a cog in a machine, right? So it's like, I've seen people come out of the corporate jobs and they come and they're like, well, maybe I can help you here, or we can start this business. I've always had this idea.
What I noticed here is that when people get their nutrition right, then their head gets straight, right? And they start noticing things. In fact, they start to have a higher quality of problem. It could be the initial problem is they hate the terrible job, not getting enough money, some health issues and so on related to their health and lifestyle. Resolve that, and then you get your head straight. And then once you get your head straight, you start paying attention of the next move that you should make. And usually that's like, oh, well, I always like doing this. And so I start a little side gig and I find other people who have that same mindset at that same level. And then they form a little business, and then they start to actually connect to the thing that they really enjoy doing and can bring value into the world. So I think it's a bit like that. Sapien is about human thriving. It's about taking people through the levels of getting to themselves to better health, getting their head straight, getting themselves to some kind of point where they can create and bring forth to the world what they feel they're put here to do, right? That's it.
Yeah. And so the organization is a worldwide thing. We're still forming it right now. And so you can get on a waiting list. We'll just put a email collection on sapien.org. And what it is all these people that believe in this, that want to grow something together, that want to be a part of the movement. I already get all these DMs and all these messages and emails of people. It's like, how can I help with Food Lies? Or what's going on with Nose to Tail? Do you need any other help there?
People are ready for it.
People are ready for it. And someone just needs to bring it all together and formalize it and share resources and do it. And this is something that we can do pretty easily.
Well, we're in the position to do it, I think, because I'm going to just say one or two reasons. One is we are not attached to any ideology, right? Even this is not an ideology. We just want to get to the closer truth and be a place where people can navigate their way to human thriving and peak health. You've been about that. I've been about that. If we have a place where everyone who believes that and doesn't want to stick to a particular ideology, they just want to know, what is it going to take? What is it that can take me from, if I've got a health condition, or even if I don't, I just want to peak my health. I just want to change the things that I do in life. I want to build a better career. I want to find a population of people who are wanting to go in this direction. Yeah, that's why, we've got to put it together, and there's no one else who's going to do it if we don't do it.
Well, yeah. And so the idea is, okay, I'll give one of the project ideas. I had this idea to do a project that benefits everyone and also can actually employ people. So this idea of a directory, because people ask me, or I even wanted to know, what's a good dermatologist in Austin that actually gets it, right? That uses root cause medicine, that isn't going to laugh me out of the room when I talk about what I'm eating and affecting my skin. So, and I put out, this was a year or two ago, and I put out a story on my Instagram, and I said, who knows, a dermatologist in Austin, and I got all these responses. So then I started putting it into a document. So what if we did that around the world, or every state in the US? We can start with the US and get all of these people. We can start maybe with practitioners, doctors, any kind of healthcare provider, the actual comprehensive database of all these people, and an easy way to find them and connect people. And it's a win-win-win all around. And it is a big project. And I don't think it can be done by some random startup in Silicon Valley. it needs to be done by the community. This is a community project. We can work on this together, and we will all crowdsource it. And I can talk about it like, hey, everyone, here's the list. Put your doctors in this list. And we can build the technology. We have technologists here. We have programmers at Sapien. We have programmers around the world that are probably listening that want to contribute to this. And so not only can we have something that's going to benefit everyone, but people can be employed and get paid for this too. This is not just some commune and we're all going to like get paid in hugs and laughter. This is like a real thing that can help people get out of the job that maybe they don't like.
I think that one key is we want to help people generate a livelihood in this domain. There's so much opportunity because there's nothing like helping people get their health back and their thriving back. That's where real, true, deep friendships are made. It has been our experience as well. So yeah, we need to, as a project, this is as a project example that we're doing one of these things, it's critical. And also if we focus it to be around health practitioners that understand these Sapien concepts and people rate them and value them as someone who can help people out of a particular condition, that's the beginning, I think. So at the ground floor, we have to get the practitioner directory together. And then there's going to be other things too, like where can you get good food? Where are all these sources and people who are doing things properly? We're seeing little things pop up.
There's Seed Oil Scout. There's the Weston A. Price website, and they can tell you, where to get the good meat and the good milk.
But it's very
just fragmented.
Yeah, fragmented.
And it's not professionally done. And so this is, I think, what my role in the world. I don't have to do every piece of this project. People know that I have other stuff going on, and I'm hitting my limit of how many projects I can take on. But that's why it's a community organization, and that we can do this together, and someone can lead these projects, and we can have a budget. And if we take in funds, everyone will see where they go.
Another thing that we really connect on, it needs to be sustainable. It's not sustainable, just environmentally sustainable. We're talking about sustainable as a business that has the ability to grow. It's got to be able to generate profits and be reinvested. It's got to be able to wash its own face, to be organized as a pro-sustainable business initiative as well. So can you tell us a bit more about the membership organization? We're talking about making this like a membership organization. How do you see that?
Yeah, there's all different types of people, like the Rotary Club or the Chamber of Commerce, or there's even churches where people come together and pool resources and even have just small dues
for a common purpose.
Purpose. And so I've heard of all these other influencers. They do their little inner circle club, and you just pay to be on the private Slack and do this, and that's great and that's fine, but the money just goes to the person. I don't want to make that, right? I want to make something where we have these dues that we pay, and it's not a large amount, but they all go to something, and it's all transparent.
Basically, if we can aggregate a large number of people who can pay like a membership, there would be a bunch of benefits around that as well. Then those resources can be taken transparently and put into these initiatives. We have all sorts. We have the digital therapeutics, we have the directory, we have a number of initiatives that we want to help, but ultimately we want to help people who are members to also be able to generate a livelihood should they want to. That's critically important, that if it's going to be a community organization, if it's going to be a movement, then people need to be able to be involved materially.
Yeah. So we're going to put this on sapien.org, drop in your email. We also will do for these people a special on the book. So we're writing a book, The Way of the Sapien, and we're going to give people early access to that. So just throw it in. I've been trying to think about what this project was for years. A couple of years ago, I was talking about the decentralized food system, and I threw it out there, and 600 people sent me their email. We have a lot of power in the people that want change, but this is the ultimate version of that.
I think the money in your pocket is a superpower. If we can coordinate and get a good membership organization going, we'll figure out benefits of it all, but really the benefit is around being involved in something that's going to be a piece of history to change the world.
Well, keeping the money in the community.
Keep the money in the community. That's right. Let people generate livelihood from that, and do it properly. Do it sustainably and transparently. We've got some ideas about how this will work to build something that's going to be sustainable and big and be able to grow. But yeah, definitely we want, sign up for early access and have a look at our book that's coming out shortly. But yeah,
that's it. Yeah, go to sapien.org.
That's how to get involved.
And that's about it. And thanks for listening. And we'll have that book out soon that will make all these thoughts more cohesive. Wow. Thanks, Drako.
Appreciate having the chance to chat. Been great.
Boom.